Steven Andress here for thelines.com, joined by John Hasselbauer, our golf betting expert. In this video, it is time for the playoffs. The FedEx Cup playoffs begin with the FedEx St. Jude Championship, and we are going to look at the early favorites. We're going to look at a course preview from John, and he's going to tell us which key stats he's honed in on to try and figure out which golfers to bet on this week. As always, you can find his preview on thelines.com on the homepage. If you're watching this closer to the start of the tournament, under the odds tab, under golf, you can find John Hasselbauer, and there is his FedEx St. Jude preview. Towards the end of the video, we'll also share a couple of the names that are surfacing early for us that we're going to add to our betting card. And on Wednesdays, John posts his full betting card on thelines.com, as well as staff bets for the rest of us in our Discord channel. You can find that by clicking on the Discord button in the top right-hand corner. And as always with any YouTube video, if you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, helps us out immensely. Let us know in the comments who you are betting on this week in a FedEx St. Jude. But John, let's start with the favorites for this week. No big surprises here at a loaded playoff field. Top five names: Rory McIlroy, Scotty Scheffler, Patrick Cantlay, Justin Thomas, Cam Smith, Xander Schauffele. In your early research, did you find yourself considering one of these names and potentially a short betting card, or is there enough value a little bit later in the board to start your card there?
Yeah, I think it makes sense to have exposure to at least one guy. I'm saying like 22 to 1 or shorter, because I think that's the top. There's so many top names, and I think the elite crop kind of extends a bit further than the top five this week. But of these names, I'm really giving a hard look to Justin Thomas and Cam Smith. I think there's a lot of merit to the Players comp, with those being the last two winners of the Players Championship. It is, in theory, supposed to be a course that rewards driving accuracy, as is TPC Sawgrass, but there's a couple different routes you can go to navigate this course. You don't have to hit driver on every hole, with it being just about 7,200 yards. It's not super short, but you can get away with some 3-wood, some less than driver off the tee. It is going to be very important to play out of the fairway. But short game, I think, is really important this week, a lot more important than we've seen over the last month or so. But really firm and fast greens, a lot of good approach shots are going to miss if they're coming out of the rough. So you got to be a confident scrambler. I think that's what draws me to those two guys. But there's a lot of options here, and I think, as we were saying before we recorded, that's why I haven't pulled the trigger on anybody yet, because I'm waiting to see if any can't miss odds present themselves to put me over.
Yeah, this might be a week. If there's a guy that you're thinking about betting, you might be rewarded by waiting till Wednesday, because just the nature of the elite golfers on the PGA Tour at this point is that none of us would really be all that surprised if any of like the top 10 or 12 names won this week. They're just really freaking good golfers, and they're going to switch spots a lot throughout the season, as we've seen. Even as deep as Tony Finau, who we both have very high in the model this week. Don't really love his odds at 22 to 1, as he's a back-to-back winner in his last couple events, but obviously you cannot argue with the form he's in. So it's going to be one of those weeks where you are trying to build a card, maybe debating back and forth between recent form and just world-class golfer at juicier odds than you typically get him. TPC Southwind course specs, 7,233 yards. It is a par 70, so only two par 5s. The past winners: Abraham Ancer, who is no longer on the tour; Justin Thomas, 13 under in 2020; Brooks Koepka, also no longer on the tour, 16 under in 2019; Dustin Johnson, another live golfer, in 2018 at 19 under, and Daniel Berger at 10 under in 2017. If we look at the course yardages, John, one of the reasons that you have par 4 scoring from 450 to 500 yards as one of your key stats is because there's a lot of holes there that fall into that category. I'm counting the 5th hole, so that's the first one. Number 6 is basically in that category. Number 7, number 9, number 10, number 13, and number 18. So that's 7 of the 18 holes that fall into that category, and the other holes are pretty close around that number as well. So as far as your other key stats to consider here this week, I want to hit on one point that you made. You mentioned Cam Smith, who, if you've been following this year, you know he contended at the Masters and won at St. Andrews, two courses where driving accuracy really isn't required at all. Very large fairways. St. Andrews, arguably the largest in the entire world because they share between two holes. He won the Players. So you mentioned driving accuracy is somewhat important this week, but I imagine it can't be critical if you're still considering Cam Smith, it seems.
Yeah, I think the distinct, and you can even throw in Kapalua in there too, where he's also won on what might be the second largest fairways here. So that's obviously his type. But he's also won at Waialae Country Club and TPC Sawgrass, which are more positional. So I think the distinction here is that it's not a course where you have to hit driver accurately. You're going to have options where you can club down and hit a driving iron or a 3-wood and still have 170 in mid irons like that. So I think the difference between here and say TPC Potomac would be that you have to be a great total driver where you have to be accurate with your driver because there's a lot of long holes and narrow fairways that you can't lay up on. Here I see some bailout options. It's definitely gonna be a benefit to be accurate off the tee. And I think when you look at the list of players who've had success here, they just tend to be elite names, but names that are, strength of their game is the driving. I think Cameron Smith is sort of at a point where he just has the talent to play well on any given course, and he kind of transcends course fit. And once you get a guy coming off of a major championship win and he's pushing 20-1 at a course where he just finished top 5 the previous year, it sort of becomes value bet territory.
Can't argue with you there. The mullet has been on fire for sure. Some of the other key stats to consider this week: strokes gained tee to green, strokes gained on approach as always. You also have strokes gained ball striking in there. Just for those that aren't aware, John, do you choose one or the other on certain weeks, or are you combining them? And how much weight are you giving to both of these similar statistics with strokes gained on approach and strokes gained ball striking?
Yeah, I think the correlated stats over the years have shown that just pure strokes gained off the tee hasn't really moved the needle here. If you're a great off the tee player, doesn't necessarily translate to success. So the strokes gained ball striking metric is just going to combine the two so that you're factoring in some of it, but it's also blended with strokes gained approach. For my model, I'm prioritizing strokes gained approach, but I'm also going to just put the ball striking metric in there with no weight behind it, just so that I can filter by it and reference it to see is this player good in both categories. Because obviously, if you're elite in both off the tee and approach, you're going to be set up very well here. But more importantly, I think it's the tee to green game, because the short game is going to come into play a bit more here than usual.
As far as the irons, you're also pinpointing proximity to the hole at the ranges between 125 and 200. Let's talk some short game here, though. Opportunities gained, scrambling gained, strokes gained putting on Bermuda. That is the surface. You also are taking a look at how these golfers have done on firm and fast greens. So iron play important, but it sounds like we're talking maybe major championship short game conditions here this week.
Yeah, Florida, like Bermuda conditions, I think chipping out of the Bermuda rough over here is going to be a bit nuanced. So I'm looking at the comp course performance in short game as well. Places like a Sawgrass, a PGA National where they have the Honda Classic. Even the Sanderson Farms at Country Club of Jackson has a very similar setup. East Lake, very similar. So I want to see how guys are getting around on the comp courses, specifically tee to green. Major championship events tend to reward the best tee to green players, so I wouldn't go as far as to say I'm like looking at performance in majors, but obviously it's going to be a good indicator if you're playing well against the best players in the world in difficult conditions. That can only help you out here. I would say the winning score, I would expect it to still find the mid to low teens. So that, I guess that would maybe be the distinction when you're looking at like a Matt Fitzpatrick, who really tends to thrive in single digit, really difficult conditions under par. I think that might not be enough to win here, strictly grinding all the time. You have to go out and get birdies where you have opportunities to.
what I love as well about the chart that you put here on correlated stats is that I find myself using this each week, not necessarily to figure out what to include when I'm looking at stats to consider, but what to eliminate. What stats do I not care about? Because in your first column, you have your average rank throughout the entire PGA Tour season and how they correlate with strokes gained total. And then for this particular tournament. So if you look at this chart, obviously bogey avoidance falls out of the top 5. Strokes gained par 3, not as important. Strokes gained par 5, definitely not as important because there's only 2 of them on the course. So that's been helpful to me all year. And just for those that are wondering how to apply this, that's one way I apply it, is it helps me figure out what stats I care about less in any given week. Let's look at your player spotlight here briefly before we move on to the rest of the names we're considering. Billy Horschel. He was a course comp guy last week at Wyndham, finished 2 strokes out of the top 20. What made him stand out to you this time around?
Yeah, a lot of subjective factors, I would say, when we're looking at a pure Bermuda tee to green course. I'm going to think of the Florida guys like a Billy Horschel, who've had a ton of success on the Florida swing itself, putting on these greens, and specifically in the firm and fast conditions, where when you add that layer on, that's where Billy Horschel really jumps to the top. He was in contention at the Concession a couple years ago on a new Florida course that had a lot of water throughout, finished just short of Colin Morikawa there. And, the list goes on of events near Florida on pure Bermuda courses where he's contended. Off the tee, he's been really great this season. He's gained in accuracy to the field by percent of fairways gained in all but one event, and that was the U.S. Open, the only time that he was not more accurate than the field. That's going to be huge here. Like we said, if you're not going to go the Cam Smith route and overpower the course with your short game, then you want to, at least as a starting point, have a reliable driver where it's going to find the fairway. That's going to position you to create the most opportunities. And he's very comfortable on Bermuda greens. So at that point, then it just becomes a matter of how many approach shots can he hit within birdie making range. But I think he has a really safe floor this week. He's somebody that I'm kind of expecting to be in the top 20 this week. He'll be most likely a top 20 bet of mine. And the last thing I would say, the motivation, I think he cares a lot about the FedEx playoffs. He's a past tour champion. He's sort of become Rory's understudy as like an advocate for the PGA Tour against LIV. He's making all of these comments whenever he does get the spotlight. He loves the PGA Tour, and I think it would mean a lot to him to win a FedEx Cup event. So I think he's got his full focus here. I'm not saying everybody in the field doesn't, but I think it would mean a lot to him to win. And he's coming off of a win at the Memorial where we were saying, the same thing. This is a loaded field, and you want the best players. And he came out and won it at very similar odds to what we're seeing this week.
Yeah, well said. I think the motivation is there with the form and the course fit as well. So towards the bottom of John's preview, you can find his player pool of guys he's considering this week, both from an outright bet perspective, top 20s, DFS, and again, his full betting card will be on thelines.com on Wednesdays. Your model favorites here. Sam Burns, number 1 overall this week, and we were talking beforehand here. That's the first name we can mention that you added to your betting card this week right off the bat. And the number he started at lasted all of about 30 seconds, it seems.
Yeah, I usually I'm quick on the trigger in the morning, and if I see a good number, I hop on it. I didn't even get a chance to see that 40 that was there for a hot second. So I'm on him at 35-1. I think it's still a great number. He was in the playoff again last year. Another guy who, if you're thinking about positional, he's not the first name that comes to mind, but you look at what he's done on Innisbrook at the Valspar. That's a course that's meant to be positional, that he's still gotten around great on the merit of his putter. And that the iron play and the short game is going to be there on Bermuda conditions. So I really like him this week. I think it's a fair number, 35-1 in a strong field. Beyond that, like we were saying, haven't really pulled the trigger on many other bets. I'm waiting to see if we can get any drift. I expect that we will see some fluctuation across the books as the week goes on, but I'll probably lock up my card later tonight with at least one player at 25-1 or under, I would say.
I'm highlighting here on the screen the rest of the top 10 in your model, and I want to mention a couple names that also wound up being top 10 in the model that I used. I had a lot of emphasis on iron play, just full disclosure. I did have strokes gained tee to green in there and fairways gained, but when you combine strokes gained on approach and the proximity distances, I was looking at about 35% weight on that iron play this week coming into this event. So it's going to make for a little bit different top 10 than one you have, but a couple of the names that are in there, Xander Schauffele is also in my top 10. Max Homa is also in my top 10. This is over the last 36 rounds, by the way. And that's it. Sam Burns was just outside of it, I believe. So, but I will also say Sung J M was in there if you filter for the last 24 rounds. So he's really gotten his game in order here, and we know that Sung Jae plays well when the conditions are tougher. If you go back and look at his wins and when he's top 5, it's been like single digits under par. So with the firm and fast greens, that could set up nicely for Sung J M as well this week. But John, as we wrap up here, I mean, let's look at the outright board. And to your point, Sam Burns down here, even with the move to 35-1. Oh, and by the way, if you still want to bet him, people, you may want to go get it because he's already at 25-1 at Caesars. So this number is on the move. By the time you watch this, that 35 might be gone. But use our odds tool at thelines.com. Go under the odds tab, click on player prop finder tool. You can just search by name to find the best available, or you can go to the odds compare table in John's preview here. But just look at these names, man. We mentioned the top 5, and then after that, U.S. Open winner Matt Fitzpatrick. John Rahm has slipped to 22-1 as the best available price. This guy was like 7-1 to win the Mexico Open. Tony Finau, 22-1 off back-to-back wins. Will Zalatoris, you still can't putt worth a shit, is 25-1, but he's a hell of a ball striker. Jordan Spieth, we know him, 29. Cam Young, Rookie of the Year likely, 30. And then we find Sam. By the way, Cam Young, I love the guy. Still hasn't won a damn thing. He's contended like crazy, but he still hasn't won anything. And he's above Sam Burns, who's a multiple-time winner. He's above Colin Morikawa, who's a multiple major winner. And he's above Sung J M, who's won a couple of times on tour. Shane Lowry, who's an Open champion. So you're getting the old-fashioned pedigree argument versus recent form this week. So for me personally, John, I'm going to have to make a decision here on whether I'm going to strictly follow the model, who has some big names in there, but they're at the top of the board, a Justin Thomas, or Rory McIlroy, or Xander Schauffele, or I'm going to have to try and follow some of the recent form stuff, because Tony Finau's number 1 for me in the last 36 rounds, and you're getting a terrible number on him for what you got 2 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. You want to take a long shot, Max Homa's in there. Victor Hovland is in my top 10. I'm going to have to bet him, I think, at 40-1. He's slipped a little. So in this top tier, it's just interesting to me because I just have to make a process decision. Am I going to follow the names that are surfacing in the model, or am I going to look longer than the last 50 rounds, maybe last 75 rounds, and take some of these world-class golfers that may not have just played as well recently?
Yeah, well, you are coming off of a nice win last week on Tom Kim, so you just got to channel the same strategy and the same thought process that you went with last week.
Well, Tom Kim was interesting because he was not a model guy over the past 50 and 36 rounds, right? He didn't have enough rounds, but he was there for the last 24 rounds. So the really recent form was strong for him, but I'm not sure we can apply that in the same situation here, right, John? Because that was a much weaker field. This is a playoff event with the biggest names in golf, minus the live guys in this tournament. So I think what will likely happen for me is maybe a mix between taking some shots on numbers. Like, I'm going to hate myself for it, but because I can see him just, I know, here's the thing. The money is huge, right? It's not just the money in this event. They're chasing $15 million for the FedEx Cup. So the motivation's there for the money. But I don't know. I think I can trust that John Rahm's going to try and bring his A game with the money involved here at 22-1. That's like double the odds of what we were getting a few weeks ago. But it's faith, right? It's blind faith because that's not a guy that has had the recent form.
Yeah, you're right. It's sort of like you said. It's a leap of faith. Like this guy has to eventually channel the form that we know that he has. But he's coming off of one top 10 in the last 3 months. It's looking like so. It's not great, but that's how you get a world class former world number one player at 22 to 1 odds. It's just a factor of the market. So. A lot of difficult decisions to be made, like you said. I think for me personally, this type of week becomes more gut based. Is this guy going to win a FedEx Cup event against these other players? Is that number making sense? Is he better than that number? So I will probably stray away from strictly tailing the model and put my bigger picture hat on and try to make decisions that way.
I will say with the success I had with the Kim outright last week and looking at really recent form and how high he peaked in that model, the one exception to this I'm probably going to have to make is Sung Jae Im, because he's the guy that's really peaking in super recent form last 24 rounds. So that's a guy that I will probably add based on the model at 35 to 1. And he also has win pedigree. He's won the past couple of years on tour. But some of these other names I think I'm going to have to consider, like a John Rahm at 22 to 1, a Morikawa at 33 to 1, a Victor Hovland at 40 to 1. I mean, these guys would be minus money favorites against some of these other guys at the top of the field in a head-to-head. They just would be.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, it's kind of paralysis by over-analysis at this point because you're just staring at these numbers and don't know what to do with them because you don't usually get to see players of this caliber at these long of odds. So going to be a tough call, but hopefully that means it's a good tournament with a lot of big names in the mix come Sunday.
All right, John's betting card will be out on Wednesday. Let us know in the comments who you are betting on for the FedEx St. Jude Championship. As always, thank you so much for watching. Best of luck navigating this difficult handicapping challenge this week in the world of golf. So, again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.